It was a night like any other, or so it seemed. The air was crisp, salted by the breath of the sea. Waves whispered against the shoreline, and the stars hung quietly above, as they always had, indifferent, distant, eternal. Daniel Oliveira walked alone along the moonlit sands, hands buried in his jacket pockets, eyes wandering skyward, searching, perhaps, for something his own life had failed to deliver. He was 34. Ordinary, a computer repair technician in a sleepy coastal town. No great tragedies had defined him, nor had any miracles. His existence was a straight line drawn across the dull fabric of routine. And then, the sky fractured. Not a crack of thunder. Not a meteor. Something else. A soundless rupture tore open the heavens, a jagged wound, its edges shimmering with impossible colors, hues that defied description, shades that no human eye had ever witnessed. The stars beyond bent and folded as though the very laws of space were warping. And from that rift, something fell. No, someone. A body, silhouetted against the impossible light, tumbled through the tear, limbs graceful, form unmistakably humanoid yet hauntingly other. The figure fell, struck the surf, and lay still as the rift convulsed, then sealed itself shut with a ripple, as if the universe hurried to mend the scar it had never meant to show. Daniel stood paralyzed. His instincts screamed at him to flee, to pretend none of this was real. But curiosity, dread, and something far more primal drove him forward. He waded into the shallow tide, heart hammering. There she was, lying half submerged, breath labored, utterly alien, and unspeakably beautiful. Her skin was silver, not metallic, but a living liquid sheen that shimmered like mercury under the moonlight. Tiny waves of bioluminescence danced across her body, shifting from blues to golds to fleeting flashes of violet. Her face was elongated, elegant beyond anything human architecture could design. Smooth, flawless, with high cheekbones and no visible nostrils, just subtle ridges suggesting the place where breathing should occur. Her mouth was small, lips tinted a soft cobalt blue, trembling slightly. But her eyes, oh, her eyes. Two immense orbs, almond-shaped and radiant with violet light. They were not merely windows to her soul. They were entire galaxies condensed into gaze, swirling with cosmic storms and distant suns. Strands of translucent filaments floated from her scalp, flowing like jellyfish tendrils in the breeze, refracting the moonlight into fragments of rainbows. Her form was slender, elegant, with limbs slightly longer in proportion than a human's. A form-fitting second skin, seemingly grown from her own flesh, pulsed gently with veins of sapphire light, tracing delicate patterns across her body. She was breathing, barely. And then, her eyes opened fully. Daniel staggered back. His mind recoiled at the impossible geometry of her gaze, as though her pupils were gateways into higher dimensions. A sound echoed not in his ears, but inside his mind. "Help me." The voice trembled, fragile, musical, alien. His fear shattered. Instinct overtook him. Daniel lunged forward, lifting her from the surf, cradling her weightless yet substantial form in his arms. Her skin was warm, astonishingly so, and unnervingly soft, like velvet woven from liquid light. "Jesus, okay. I've got you," he gasped, unsure whether he was speaking to her or himself. She clung weakly, one hand rising to touch his cheek. The fingertips were long, elegant, tipped with bioluminescent pads that flickered gently against his skin. Portal, broken, stranded. Her voice echoed within him, broken, struggling, vulnerable. And that was the night Daniel Oliveira, an utterly ordinary man, became tethered to someone utterly extraordinary. The night the sky tore itself open and never closed again. Daniel carried her across the sand, adrenaline masking the unreality of the moment. By instinct he avoided streetlights, ducked between hedgerows, and eventually reached his modest flat, a second-story walk-up overlooking the sea. He laid her gently on his worn sofa, scrambling for towels, blankets, anything to help. She was conscious, barely. Her breathing came in slow, measured waves, but every so often a tremor rippled through her form, as though her very existence is strained against unseen forces. You need water? Food? Medicine? He asked, kneeling beside her. The question felt absurd the moment it left his mouth. Her eyes fluttered open. With a strained effort, she reached out, fingertips brushing against his temple. And suddenly, a flood. Not words, not sentences, concepts, images, emotions, structures of thought. Daniel glimpsed, just for a heartbeat, impossible cities suspended in violet clouds, creatures composed of folded geometry, rivers that flowed not with water, but with streams of raw light. Zalia, my name, Zalia Awayan. The thought pressed into him like a whisper woven from electricity. He blinked, breathless. Zalia. She nodded weakly, the smallest of smiles touching those cobalt lips. I did not mean to come here. Portal collapse, wrong vector. Daniel frowned, forcing his mind to adapt. You're not from space, are you? You're from somewhere else. Another dimension. Her gaze, glowing violet, held his. A flicker of amusement, perhaps. Or sorrow. Yes, Dimension Cytheria, my origin, unstable rift, now stranded. He sat back, scrubbing both hands over his face. This is madness. This isn't real. This can't be real. And yet, there she was, breathing, shimmering, alive. Over the next days, or perhaps it was weeks, time grew distorted in her presence. Zalia recovered. Her wounds were not biological in the way Daniel understood. Her very quantum structure had destabilized in the transit between realities. Slowly, using a combination of meditation, energy manipulation, and materials Daniel fetched for her, copper wiring, silicon chips, rare earth magnets, she began to stabilize. And in that fragile interim, something else began to form between them. A connection. Not merely fascination, though there was plenty of that, but a growing resonance. A quiet understanding, unspoken yet profoundly felt. Daniel found himself speaking to her as he never had to anyone, confessing his loneliness, his boredom with his world, his quiet ache for something more. Zalia listened, and though her speech was broken, fragmented through translation matrices and conceptual bridges, her responses were always poignant, curious, gentle. And though she was a being of incomprehensible power and intellect, Daniel saw, beneath it all, a vulnerability that mirrored his own. Two souls, both displaced, both lost, and neither willing to let go. When her strength returned, the truth became unavoidable. Zalia could not stay. Her presence here was a fracture, an error in the continuum. Prolonged exposure risked collapse of local space-time geometries. She had to return, but not alone. Come with me. The thought, delivered directly into Daniel's mind, stunned him. Me? But I can't survive wherever you're from, he stammered. Her luminous gaze softened. You can. I will adapt you. Our technology, it transcends flesh. You will be safe. But it must be your choice. A choice. The most impossible choice anyone had ever faced. Leave his world, his reality, behind, or lose her forever. In the end, the choice wasn't hard at all. Hand in hand, standing before a shimmering aperture of swirling dimensional lattice, a portal constructed from fragments of Cypherian tech and Daniel's own jury-rigged Earth devices, they stepped forward. Together. The moment Daniel crossed, he knew, down to his molecular structure, that he did not belong here. Gravity itself felt different. Colors vibrated at frequencies beyond human perception. The air tasted sweet, electric, rich with ions and scents unknown. Before him rose the Cypherian capital, Vaishara, the spiral nexus. A colossal structure that wound upwards into the clouds, its crystalline spires orbiting a singularity core. A black hole suspended in magnetic flux, providing endless energy. Creatures of impossible form drifted through the skies. Some biological, some mechanical, some somewhere in between. But everywhere he walked, Daniel felt it. Eyes on him, minds brushing against his own, evaluating, judging. Here, he was the alien. The anomaly. Vaishara, the spiral nexus, was breathtaking. A city not built but grown, its crystalline spires spun upwards in elegant helices, floating in magnetic suspension around a pulsing core of gravitational energy. Great bridges of translucent matter arced between towers, thrumming with streams of bioelectric light. Every surface seemed alive. Veins of glowing liquid pulsed beneath crystal floors. Trees of silver filigree bore fruit that shimmered like stars. Creatures, some like jellyfish spun from neon threads, others like translucent serpents woven from dark matter, drifted lazily through the air. Daniel's senses were overwhelmed. His eyes struggled to parse the sheer depth of color, as this world operated on spectrums far beyond human vision. Sounds reverberated not merely through air but directly through the bones, and sense, sweet, metallic, alien, lingered on the edge of comprehension. And yet, amongst all this splendor, the stares persisted. Zalia's kin were beautiful beyond reckoning, elegant, towering beings of liquid metal skin, luminous eyes, and movements that seemed choreographed by gravity itself. Where Zalia's expression carried warmth, curiosity, and tenderness, the expressions of others were colder, analytical, detached, organic anomaly detected. Voices whispered not through mouths, but through electromagnetic pulses that tingled against Daniel's skull. Unquantifiable entropy signature. Contamination vector confirmed. Zalia held his hand tightly. Her presence alone was his shield, her social standing among the Cypherian high caste formidable. Her family were architects of continuity, engineers of spacetime itself. But even her influence had limits. Her father, a being named Vala Wayen, whose presence seemed to warp the space around him, regarded Daniel as one might observe an intriguing but dangerous artifact. Explain this choice, Zalia. His voice was not sound, but vibration in every molecule of air and matter. This, primitive. It carries a chaos signature incompatible with our continuum. Zalia stood firm, her bioluminescent patterns flaring defiantly. He is not chaos. He is potential. And he is my bonded. Gasps rippled through the gathering minds. Bonded. The word carried weight, an unbreakable neural tether, a fusion of consciousness recognized by Cypherian law as sacred. Daniel barely understood the magnitude of it, until now. But for some, the union was not merely scandalous. It was dangerous. Life among the Cypherians was a dizzying balance between awe and terror. Zalia's apartment, if it could be called that, was a suspended chamber of crystalline membranes, orbiting a miniature singularity for energy, with walls that shifted transparency according to thought. From here, Daniel could see the entire curvature of the spiral nexus, a city with no discernible ground, only layers of floating architecture woven through gravitational flux lines. Zalia worked tirelessly to adapt him. Nanostructures were introduced into his bloodstream, gradually upgrading his biological functions, enhancing perception, allowing him to breathe atmospheres laced with exotic particles, processing electromagnetic thought patterns into something akin to language. And yet, nothing could shield him from the coldness of the Cypherian collective. Everywhere he walked, the whispers followed, minds brushing against his, delivering silent judgments. Some expressed curiosity, others, hostility. One night, if night could even be measured here, Zalia confessed the deeper truth. Daniel, you are an anomaly. Your quantum structure, your DNA, it is, she paused, struggling for the right construct, imperfect from their view. But that imperfection creates resilience, flexibility. You are a wild card in a deterministic continuum. His presence was causing ripples in the Cypherian lattice, minor but measurable. To beings accustomed to perfect causality, his very existence was a fracture point. Some will try to end it, to sever what we are. Others, her eyes softened, glowing deeper, may try to use it. Daniel realized then that their love was not merely a scandal. It was a weapon, or a contagion, depending on the eye that beheld it. The first attack came subtly. Daniel awoke one morning, or its Cypherian equivalent, to find his neural interface flooded with chaotic signals. Waves of dissonant thought, designed to overload his fragile human cognition, pulsed like static through his mind. Zalia responded instantly. Biobarriers flared into place, cutting off the assault. Her filaments snapped with arcs of electricity, her form tense, her body language sharp, predatory. "They have begun," she said grimly. The assailants were a faction known as the Continuum Purists, radical Cypherians who believed in absolute dimensional purity. To them, Daniel was an existential threat, a fracture point that could unravel the stability of their reality. But as the attacks escalated, sabotage, neural viruses, psychic incursions, another truth surfaced. Not all Cypherians opposed them. Some saw in Daniel what Zalia saw, the spark of possibility, the seed of evolution. A resistance was quietly forming, and at its heart stood their forbidden bond. As tensions boiled, an ancient structure, the vortex spire, began to destabilize. It was the anchor point of the Cypherian continuum, the very mechanism that maintained the separation between dimensions. The purists blamed Daniel, declaring that his presence had fractured the veil. But the truth Zalia uncovered was far darker. The veil had always been fracturing. Her crossing to Earth was not an accident. It was a symptom of a universe unraveling. Their love was not the cause of the collapse. It was merely the light that revealed the cracks. And now, those cracks were widening. In a desperate gambit, Zalia and Daniel led a coalition of dissident Cypherians in an attempt to stabilize the failing continuum. The plan was madness, to use Daniel's chaotic quantum signature as a patch, a living stabilizer, to bridge collapsing dimensional strata. But the process was lethal. It would overwrite his physical form, permanently binding him to Cypherian space. He would never be able to return to Earth. As the moment loomed, Daniel and Zalia stood together beneath the swirling skies of the vortex spire. "I never belonged there," Daniel whispered, voice trembling. "Not truly. I belong wherever you are." Her hands cradled his face, her luminous filaments wrapping gently around him. Together, always, across all horizons. And together, they stepped into the vortex. When the light faded, the spiral nexus was transformed. The veil was no more. The barriers between dimensions dissolved, not into chaos, but into a new form of harmony, woven from the threads of both order and unpredictability. Daniel was no longer fully human, nor was Zalia entirely Cypherian. They were something new, the first of a hybrid lineage that would change the fate of all realities. No longer strangers, no longer anomalies, but the future itself.